Secret Hypnosis made me her perfect secretary. That's the title I never thought would describe my life. But here I am, speaking the truth as if confessing a secret that's been sitting inside my chest for years. When I first heard the word hypnosis, I dismissed it as some parlor trick, something stage performers use to make people bark like dogs or dance foolishly in front of a laughing crowd. I never thought it could change someone at their core. I never thought it could change me. I worked in a small firm. Nothing glamorous, just a dusty office with endless paperwork and an old boss who never cared whether I existed or not. My days were gray, routine, uneventful. Then one day, everything shifted when I was asked to help out a friend. She was an ambitious woman, sharp and always perfectly put together, the kind of person whose presence turned heads when she entered the room. Her name was Clara. She had recently started her own business and needed someone trustworthy to assist her, even if only temporarily. She told me she couldn't find a secretary who understood her vision, who could keep up with her pace, who could adapt to her rhythm. I was hesitant, but she insisted. She said she needed me. At first, it was ordinary work emails, scheduling, typing documents, but she had this way of talking, soft and persuasive, almost like a melody. Sometimes when I sat across from her, I would lose track of time, watching her lips move as she explained what needed to be done. She was unlike anyone else I knew. One afternoon, she told me she was experimenting with something unusual, a technique she had studied, a form of guided hypnosis meant to improve focus, confidence, and adaptability. She laughed lightly as she explained, saying it sounded strange, but had helped many people unlock their hidden potential. I didn't think much of it, but she looked at me with those eyes that seemed to see past my doubts, and before I could find an excuse, I agreed to try. The first session was simple. She asked me to close my eyes, breathe slowly, and follow her voice. I expected nothing. But then, something curious happened. It was as if her words bypassed my thoughts and went directly into me, like gentle waves washing over stone. I felt calm, more centered than I had in years. When I opened my eyes, I realized an hour had passed, though it felt like minutes. She smiled knowingly, as if she had expected it. From that day on, she suggested we continue. She said it would help me become the perfect secretary she needed, someone who could anticipate tasks, stay composed under stress, and carry myself with poise. At first, it was all practical organization, memory, speech. She guided me to be sharper, more articulate, more confident in my posture. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, there were subtle shifts. She would say, "Imagine yourself standing tall, composed, elegant." She would tell me, "You can handle things with grace." She spoke of refinement, of attentiveness, of charm. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was shaping me, smoothing away my rough edges, pushing me towards something I hadn't considered. One day, she placed a folder in front of me and said, "I want you to take charge of this meeting." My stomach turned. Me? I was never the one in front. I was always behind, hidden. But she spoke gently, hypnotically, reminding me of the strength inside me. And somehow, when I walked into that room, I wasn't myself. I was someone composed, polished, almost graceful. People listened to me. They respected me. Afterward, Clara looked at me with satisfaction and said, "See, you are becoming exactly who you were meant to be." That night, I stared at myself in the mirror. Something was changing. It wasn't only in how I spoke or acted. It was in how I carried myself, how I felt. My old clothes seemed ill-fitting, awkward, mismatched with the person inside. I shrugged it off, thinking it was all in my head. But over the following weeks, the feeling grew stronger. Clara noticed. She always noticed. She would tilt her head and smile, as if she had predicted it all along. Then one day, she said the words that made me freeze. "If you want to be perfect, you must learn to embrace all parts of yourself, even the ones you've hidden." I didn't know what she meant, not until she brought a box into the office. She set it on the desk and pushed it toward me. Inside was clothing not the kind I had ever worn, not the kind I thought I could ever wear. Elegant blouses, skirts, delicate accessories, things that belonged to her world, not mine. My throat tightened, my hands trembled. I told her this wasn't me. But she spoke softly, the way she always did, weaving her voice like a spell. She told me to close my eyes, to breathe, to let go of resistance. And as I did, the fear faded, replaced by a strange calm. She whispered, "You are my secretary, and a perfect secretary carries themselves with grace. Imagine it. Feel it. Become it." The next moments were like a dream. I don't even remember the exact instant I put on the blouse, the skirt, the heels. All I remember is standing before the mirror, staring at someone both unfamiliar and familiar. It was me, but different, refined, poised, softer yet stronger. My first instinct was to panic, but Clara's voice was there, reassuring, steady. She told me I looked exactly how I should, that this was my true potential unfolding. She said this wasn't about costume or disguise, it was about alignment, about becoming the version of myself capable of everything I had once thought impossible. From that day forward, things accelerated. Under her guidance, I learned to walk differently, to speak with clarity and elegance, to move with a presence that commanded attention without raising my voice. At first, I felt like an imposter, but little by little, it became natural. My colleagues noticed, but didn't question. They saw confidence where there had once been insecurity. They saw composure where there had been hesitation. The secret of how it had happened stayed between Clara and me. But secrets have weight. At night, I lay awake wondering who I really was. Was this transformation something I chose, or something that had been woven into me by suggestion, by hypnosis? Sometimes I caught my reflection and hardly recognized the person staring back. Other times, I felt a strange pride, as if I had finally discovered who I truly was all along. The duality tore at me, fear and acceptance, doubt and courage. The most difficult moment came when Clara introduced me to a client, calling me her secretary with absolute confidence. The client looked at me, smiled, and treated me with respect I had never felt before. There was no hesitation, no suspicion, no mockery. For the first time, I realized they saw me exactly as Clara wanted them to, and maybe as I wanted them to as well. The realization was terrifying and liberating at the same time. Clara never pushed me too hard. She guided me, always with that calm voice, always reminding me I was capable of more. Over time, I stopped feeling like I was under hypnosis. I stopped needing her words to believe in myself. I became the role I thought I was only pretending to play. I became her perfect secretary not because of the clothes or the mannerisms, but because I embraced the strength, the elegance, the presence she had unlocked in me. Yet deep inside, I still ask myself, was it her hypnosis, or was it me all along? Did she shape me, or did she only peel away the layers hiding my true self? I may never know. All I know is that the life I lead now is unrecognizable from the one I had before. I walk with confidence. I speak with clarity. I carry myself with dignity. And yes, I keep the secret of how it began locked inside. But now, as I tell this story, I wonder if it was ever really a secret at all. Maybe the truth was written in me from the start, waiting for the right voice, the right moment, the right guide to bring it out. Secret hypnosis made me her perfect secretary, but in the end, maybe it simply made me the truest version of myself. The days that followed were some of the strangest in my life. I woke up each morning with a sense of uncertainty and anticipation, as if I was stepping into a story I hadn't written, but was somehow the main character of. Every time I entered Clara's office, she had a way of reminding me, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly, that I was evolving, changing, and becoming closer to the vision she saw in me. At first, I resisted in small ways, slipping back into my old clothes on weekends, speaking in my old casual tone when I was home alone, but then I noticed something unsettling. Those moments felt empty, hollow, almost like I was pretending to be the old version of myself. The confidence I had tasted in her presence didn't follow me when I reverted to who I used to be. It was like a shadow trying to step back into the light. Clara saw it too. One evening after work, she looked at me for a long moment and said quietly, "You can't keep living with one foot in the past and one in the present. You have to choose." Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Choosing meant acknowledging that the line between who I had been and who I was becoming had blurred beyond recognition. She offered to guide me further. Another session, another hour of her voice threading into my thoughts. This time it wasn't about skills or confidence. It was about identity. She spoke about shedding fear, about embracing the courage to live truthfully, about letting go of the masks that never fit me in the first place. My heart pounded as she asked me to imagine myself free of hesitation, fully aligned with the image I had begun to see in the mirror. She said, "Perfection isn't about pretending. It's about allowing." Those words echoed in me long after the session ended. The following week, she gave me a task that pushed me further than anything before. She wanted me to represent her company at a networking event. It was formal, high-profile, filled with business leaders and professionals who expected poise and precision. I wanted to say no, to shrink back into invisibility, but she insisted. She told me she believed in me, and more importantly, she made me believe in myself. Preparing for that event was unlike anything I had done. Clara helped me choose what to wear, how to style myself, how to walk into a room with quiet confidence. She wasn't just dressing me, she was teaching me how to embody the role completely. When the night came, I stood in front of the mirror trembling. The reflection looking back at me was someone I barely recognized. Elegant,
Polished.
and yet undeniably me. My heart was in my throat as I stepped out the door. The event itself was a blur of lights, voices, and clinking glasses. I remember the first person who greeted me, their warm smile, the way they addressed me with respect. I remember answering questions with clarity, handling conversations with a confidence that surprised even me. No one doubted me. No one questioned who I was. They accepted me instantly, as if this had always been who I was meant to be. When the night ended, I left with business cards, compliments, and something I hadn't felt in years: pride. Clara's reaction was quiet but telling. She didn't praise me with loud words or exaggerated gestures. She simply looked at me with a soft smile, the kind that carried both satisfaction and certainty, as if she had known from the very beginning that this moment would come. But the deeper I went into this life, the heavier the secret became. I couldn't tell my family. I couldn't tell my old friends. I carried it silently, afraid of their judgment, afraid they wouldn't understand. At the same time, hiding it felt like betraying the person I was becoming. Every day was a balance between fear and freedom. There were moments of doubt, moments where I stood in front of the mirror and whispered to myself, "Who are you?" There were nights where I wanted to run back to my old life, to throw away the clothes, the voice, the new identity. But every time I tried, I felt a deeper truth pulling me back. It wasn't the hypnosis alone. It was me. It was the part of me that had been buried, silenced, and now finally had the courage to rise. One of the most emotional moments came unexpectedly. I was filing papers late in the office when Clara walked in quietly. She sat across from me and watched me for a while before speaking. "Do you know why I chose you?" she asked. I shook my head, unsure. She leaned forward and said, "Because I saw something in you that you couldn't see in yourself. You had the strength to become more than you believed. I just gave you the key." Her words broke me. I felt tears welling up, a mix of gratitude and fear and relief. I realized then that this wasn't manipulation. It wasn't control. It was guidance. She had unlocked a door, but I had been the one to walk through it. And yet, the story doesn't end there. Transformation isn't a single moment, it's a series of choices, every day, every hour. There were still battles ahead. There were still people I had to face, truths I had to confess, risks I had to take. The path wasn't simple. But with each step, the fear lessened and the courage grew. Secret hypnosis made me her perfect secretary, yes. But it also made me something else. It made me honest. It made me brave. And most of all, it made me realize that sometimes the person we are most afraid to become is the one we were always meant to be. The first real test of my transformation came unexpectedly, not from clients or strangers, but from my own family. My sister called one weekend, asking if I could come over for a casual dinner. I almost said no, instinctively afraid of being seen. But Clara, as always, gave me that steady look and reminded me, hiding will only make you weaker. Face them. Let them see you, and you'll realize the world doesn't collapse when you stand as yourself. So I went. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I drove to my sister's house. When I arrived, I hesitated at the door, my heart pounding, every worst-case scenario flashing through my head. What if they laughed? What if they rejected me? What if they never looked at me the same way again? But I rang the bell anyway. When the door opened, there was a long silence. My sister's eyes widened as she took in the sight of me, the clothes, the posture, the subtle makeup Clara had encouraged me to try. I braced myself for judgment. Instead, she whispered softly, "You look happy." Those words nearly undid me. My throat tightened and I fought back tears. She hugged me and said, "I don't fully understand, but if this is who you are, then I support you." That night, for the first time, I felt a piece of the weight lift from my chest. Not all of it fear still lingered, but the chains loosened. I told Clara later, and she smiled in that calm, knowing way. "See," she said, "when you're authentic, the people who truly care will meet you there." But not everyone reacted with kindness. Word began to spread slowly, whispers and circles I hadn't expected. An old colleague spotted me one afternoon while I was out with Clara, and by the next week, rumors swirled in my old workplace. Some laughed. Some sneered. I heard words like weird and fake. At first, it crushed me. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, wishing I could disappear. Clara found me like that one evening, my eyes red from holding back tears. She sat beside me and said firmly, "Do not let the noise of small minds drown out your truth." They laughed because they cannot imagine the courage it takes to be what you are. But deep down, they envy it. They will never admit it, but they do. Her voice steadied me again, pulling me back from the edge of giving up. The turning point came when Clara asked me to stand at the front of a company presentation. I was terrified. This wasn't a small meeting, it was in front of dozens of people, professionals, strangers, all eyes on me. I wanted to run, but she told me something that has stayed with me ever since. You don't need to pretend anymore. They don't need the old you. They need the strong, graceful, capable person you've become. Walk out there as if the world is already yours. When I stepped onto that stage, my knees shook. But then I caught my reflection in the polished glass at the back of the hall. I saw the posture Clara had taught me, the confidence she had nurtured, the elegance I had grown into. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was acting. I felt real. The words flowed naturally, my voice steady, my presence undeniable. By the time I finished, the applause filled the room. My chest swelled with a pride I had never known before. Afterward, Clara found me backstage. She didn't say much, she never needed to. She just placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Perfect." That one word carried more weight than 1,000 praises. But perfection isn't the end of a journey. It's the beginning of harder questions. Who am I outside of this role? Who am I when no one is watching, when Clara isn't guiding me, when I face myself in the silence of my own thoughts? Hypnosis had guided me, yes, but it was no longer the hypnosis that kept me here. It was choice. My choice. And that realization was both liberating and terrifying. There were nights when I asked myself if I could ever go back. Back to the person who blended into the background, who never dared to stand out. But the truth hit me harder each time I couldn't. That person no longer existed. Even if I stripped away the clothes, the posture, the training, I would never be the same. Clara hadn't turned me into someone else. She had revealed who I really was, the self I had buried under years of fear and conformity. The final moment of clarity came months later, during a simple lunch meeting with a new client. They looked at me, listened to me speak, and afterwards said, "You are exactly the kind of person I wish I had working for me. Professional, composed, trustworthy." I smiled politely, but inside, my heart thundered. Not because of the compliment, but because I realized that this wasn't about Clara anymore. This wasn't about hypnosis. This was about me. I had become what I once thought impossible. And so, when I tell this story now, I don't call it magic. I don't even call it hypnosis. I call it awakening. Clara may have started it, but I walked the path. Secret hypnosis made me her perfect secretary. Yes, but more than that, it made me unafraid to stand in the world as myself. The truth about me couldn't stay confined to whispers forever. One afternoon, Clara asked me to accompany her to a large business conference in another city. It was bigger than anything we had ever done before, hundreds of attendees, big-name executives, press coverage. The kind of stage where every detail mattered, where image wasn't just important, it was everything. I remember standing in the hotel room the night before, staring at the outfit Clara had laid out for me. A tailored skirt suit, elegant but understated, with a silk blouse and modest heels. My hands trembled as I touched the fabric. This wasn't just about looking the part anymore. This was about claiming it in front of the world. My old self whispered in the back of my mind, telling me I was a fraud, telling me that if anyone looked too closely, they would see through me. But Clara's voice cut through the fear. Tomorrow, you are not pretending. Tomorrow, you are exactly who you are meant to be. When I walked into that conference hall the next morning, I felt the weight of every eye that turned toward me. For a heartbeat, I wanted to run, but then something extraordinary happened. No one questioned me. No one doubted me. They greeted me with handshakes and smiles, listened to my introductions, treated me with respect. The world accepted me because I carried myself with acceptance. That realization nearly brought tears to my eyes in the middle of a crowded room. But with the spotlight came exposure. A journalist, sharp-eyed and curious, approached me after one of the panels. They asked about my role, my journey, my background. I answered as best I could, but there was a flicker in their expression recognition. Later, I learned that they had known me before, back in the days when I was invisible, before Clara, before the hypnosis, before the transformation. The next week, an article appeared online. It wasn't cruel, but it was blunt. It outlined my transformation, framed it as a story of reinvention, of mystery, of identity. It didn't mock me, it painted me as a curiosity, a symbol of change. But still, it exposed the truth. The reactions came swiftly. My phone buzzed nonstop. Old friends messaged me, some in shock, some in disbelief, some in quiet admiration. My family called, voices filled with confusion, questions tumbling one after another. And then there were the strangers, the comments online, split between admiration and ridicule. Half the world seemed to celebrate me as an example of courage, while the other half spat venom, calling me a fraud, a puppet, a lie. I was overwhelmed. For days, I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I wanted to disappear. I told Clara I couldn't handle it, that I had been foolish to ever step into this life. She listened silently, then placed her hands on my shoulders and said something that burned into my memory. The world always reacts to truth with noise. But noise doesn't define you. You do. Her words gave me strength, but the battles ahead were real. There were confrontations, awkward silences at family gatherings, whispers behind my back in public places, moments where I felt stripped bare under the gaze of strangers. But there were also unexpected allies. My sister defended me fiercely to anyone who dared to mock me. A former colleague reached out to apologize for doubting me and admitted that my courage had inspired them. Even clients, the people I feared would abandon Clara's company, stayed loyal. Some even admired me more. The hardest moment came when I faced my father. He had been silent through everything, saying nothing as the news spread. One evening, I went to see him, heart pounding, terrified of rejection. He sat across from me, his face unreadable. For a long time, he said nothing. Then finally, in a voice rough with emotion, he whispered, "I don't understand all of it. But I see that you're stronger than you've ever been. And I can't deny that I'm proud of you." Those words broke me. I cried harder than I had in years, relief flooding through me. In that moment, I realized that acceptance wasn't about convincing everyone. It was about standing so firmly in my truth that the people who loved me could find a way to love me still. From then on, something shifted inside me. I no longer felt like I was balancing two identities. I was one person whole, unashamed, real. Clara's hypnosis had started it, Yes, but it was no longer hypnosis that guided me. It was choice, will, and self-acceptance. Months passed and life began to settle into a new rhythm. I wasn't just Clara's secretary anymore. I was her partner in building something bigger than either of us had imagined. Together, we grew the company. Our reputation strengthened not in spite of my transformation, but because of it. People saw authenticity, resilience, courage, and they trusted us for it. And so, when I look back now, I see the arc clearly. I began as someone invisible, someone drowning in fear and conformity. Through Clara's voice, through her guidance, I was reshaped, revealed, reborn. The secret hypnosis made me her perfect secretary, but in truth, it made me my own. Years have passed since that first afternoon when Clara asked me to close my eyes and listen to her voice. Sometimes I sit alone at night, remembering that version of me, the one who shuffled through life, invisible, unsure, small. I remember the fear that clung to me like a second skin, the doubt that whispered in every decision, the way I believed the world would never allow me to step outside the lines it had drawn for me. That person feels like a shadow now, someone I loved and pitied at the same time, someone I had to let go of in order to breathe. My life now is unrecognizable, not because everything is easy, but because everything is real. I walk into rooms and no longer shrink into the corners. I look people in the eye and they see me fully, truly, without hesitation. The title of secretary has long since expanded. I became Clara's right hand, her confidant, her partner in every sense of the word. Together we built an empire that I could never have imagined back when I was hiding behind stacks of forgotten paperwork. But the truth is, the real empire we built wasn't the company. It was me. Brick by brick, moment by moment, every whispered affirmation, every terrifying leap, every tear I shed in the dark, it all built the foundation of who I am now. Sometimes people still ask me about the article, about the whispers of hypnosis, about the mystery of my transformation. They want an explanation, a neat story that makes sense of it all. I could tell them it was hypnosis. I could say it was Clara's brilliance, her guidance, her unwavering belief. But the real answer is more complicated. Hypnosis may have opened the door, but I was the one who stepped through it. Clara may have held up the mirror, but I was the one who dared to look. The hardest part of this journey wasn't the transformation itself, it was acceptance. Accepting that the person in the mirror was real. Accepting that people would judge me, love me, hate me, misunderstand me. Accepting that no matter how loudly the world tried to define me, I had the right to define myself. That acceptance didn't come overnight. It came slowly, painfully, through every confrontation, every sleepless night, every moment I thought about giving up. But now, looking back, I wouldn't trade a second of it. I used to think perfection meant being flawless. Now I know perfection means being true. And in that sense, yes, I became the perfect secretary. Not because I fit someone else's mold, but because I stepped fully into my own. Clara once told me, the most powerful secrets are not the ones we keep from the world, but the ones we keep from ourselves until we're brave enough to face them. She was right. My secret was never really about hypnosis. It was about me. It was about the courage to stop hiding, to live loudly, to embrace every part of who I am. And so, if you've listened this far, if you've followed my story to its end, I'll tell you the truth as clearly as I can. Secret hypnosis made me her perfect secretary, but what it really did was awaken me to the life I had been too afraid to live. And now, I am no longer afraid.